Hi, it's Richard and Craig here with the Week 2 feedback video for our online course. It's Mental Health Week here in Australia right now, and on the 10th it was World Mental Health Awareness Day. So that's quite topical given that we're looking at stress this week, Craig.
That's right. I think we have stress all around the world, and particularly in developed countries, which is paradoxical, really. We sort of think things should be better with affluence, but often it's the other way.
It's often the other way, isn't it? Yeah. A lot of our learners really like the training the puppy metaphor and this idea of being gentle with themselves. And it's such an important part of mindfulness practice because often without realizing when we start to practice mindfulness, we are a little bit mentally tough, trying to hold the attention in one place or beating ourselves up when it wanders off. And to recognize that it's the nature of the mind to wander, just like an untrained puppy. So we don't fight that, and then just to see how gentle we can be as we bring it back. Lets the mind calm down, makes meditation actually easier. And in the end, paradoxically, means that we can actually focus more easily on what we want to focus on rather than getting agitated and tense.
There are lots of good dog metaphors, I think, for learning meditation, because I suppose in a way that the emotive element and the sort of normal impulses that dogs have, and what I suppose we're doing in the training is to provide a little bit of that executive functioning, a little bit of that executive control. You know, for example, you know, if we like a stray dog comes to the door and you feed it to keep it quiet, then of course it's going to come again and again and again. And our thoughts are a little bit like that. You know, they come to the mind and we feed them with attention, and then we wonder why they keep coming back so much and so persistently. And I guess in a way, when we learn to notice those unhelpful thought patterns, it's like almost the stray dog comes, it makes a lot of noise, but if we don't feed it with attention, eventually it might just kind of stop coming back so much. And
interestingly, though, if we whack it as well, it keeps coming back. And that's a strange thing, isn't it? So we want to avoid those two extremes of feeding it and fighting it.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And but in a way, we are learning to develop that executive control, which is a very important part of being mindful.
Yeah. And Craig, having said that, there is a difference between judgment, which we're trying to reduce with mindfulness practice, and discernment and seeing things clearly. Can you say something about that?
Well, you see, mindfulness will increase our level of awareness. And self-awareness means being aware of our body, but also being aware of our mental and emotional state. So mindfulness shows us more of what's going on. What happens next very often is the self-criticism, the judging, reacting, the elaboration mentally about why am I like that, I can't stand that. And which is very different to the just noticing, the impartial noticing. So when we're noticing self-aware in a mindful way, it's just the noticing. And often with that, there's a quiet kind of discernment. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, wasn't a helpful response. Or, oh, gee, what comes with rumination? Oh, it leads to that. There's a kind of recognition.
So seeing things clearly, really, but without judgment. And in fact, judgment can distort whether we're seeing things clearly, can't it? So if we can let go of that and see things clearly, we can often see very clearly that maybe certain behaviours aren't working for us, or certain thoughts we don't want to identify with, but that's very different to that reactive judgment, isn't it?
That's right. So when it gets personal, when the me bit gets into the commentary, when the reactivity to it happens, then we've gone from just the noticing, the impartiality, to take it personally, and we're pretty much back at him. We've dived into rumination and worry. Not so helpful.
Hard not to judge our practice as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah. And that can be quite a barrier in itself. You know, I'm not getting anywhere. What's wrong with me?
Not as good as my meditation yesterday.
That's right. And that's just another layer of rumination on top of thinking about lunch and thinking about how much work we've got to do. So that's just another layer of rumination and worry, like worrying about anything else that we don't have to, in a sense, get caught up in.
Yeah, that's right. And it shows up in the meditation, actually, particularly when we start meditating on the breath. The breath can be a very powerful tool for a number of reasons. You know, it helps us stay present and grounded. But also,
it's always there.
It's always there, isn't it? So if we pay attention to it, there we are. It can show us what our internal mental state's like, because it changes when we get stressed and anxious. And it's something that's it's quite hard for a lot of people just to let the breath happen naturally.
Without trying to control it.
Yeah, immediately, the moment we start paying attention to the breath, it does sort of change it. And a lot of people, when they're meditating, particularly in the beginning, are trying to control the breath. And particularly if they've done, pranayama or other meditation practices on the breath. And it creates anxiety and tension. And Yeah.
Well, there's a kind of self-consciousness too that sometimes gets in there as well.
Yeah.
Rather than noticing and just noticing without the controlling, we notice and we want to control. The same thing happens in, say, performance anxiety. People get up to speak in public, and there's awareness, but then there's this kind of self-conscious obsession and this attempt to control, which of course makes us feel very anxious. And
or sensing those body sensations, think, oh, I feel tense, I need to change this, I need to fix this, this is bad, I don't want this here.
Yeah, so each person moves in their own pace and adopts the practices they're happy to. But if people find the breath a little bit difficult, it's great if they can just welcome that and just learn to work with that.
Yeah.
Learn to work with that sort of attempt to control the self-consciousness and just learning to just ride those little waves until they cause less reaction on the way through.
I like to say that we move in the direction of allowing the breath to happen naturally, acknowledging that we might be changing it or evaluating it as we go, but to let go of that stuff. Very powerful practice.
Yes.
People falling asleep. Well, look, there are lots of obstacles. The two main obstacles, I think, to meditating are falling asleep or getting too agitated. And we're always working with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, to work with sleepiness, it's normal to start with. You know, we might want to sit up straighter, sit away from the back of the chair, half open the eyes. There are a lot of ways that we can work with sleepiness in meditation.
Even sometimes if we're that tired at the end of a day, to have a power nap for 5 or 10 minutes and then get up and have a glass of water and then meditate.
And that's it, isn't it? Because often what we're noticing when we're falling asleep meditating is just how overtired we are. A lot of us not getting enough sleep. And we start to notice that with meditation.
Yeah. And that's, there's been some discussion about mindfulness, meditation, relaxation. Are these different things the same thing? Well, kind of yes and no. Mindfulness is not just a form of meditation. So there's mindfulness meditation, but it's not just what we do sitting in the chair practicing meditation. So mindfulness is also a way of living. And that's one of the things we've really tried to emphasize in this course, is that it's getting out of the chair and being mindful in day-to-day life. As far as relaxation, I generally don't like to talk about mindfulness meditation itself being a relaxation exercise, although relaxation is quite a common side effect. But we don't set up an assumption or an expectation, or it has to be relaxing, it has to be like this, because often we get tense over not relaxing.
Sometimes when I meditate, I'm tense and my mind's going a million miles an hour, and if I had an idea that meditation should make me relaxed, I'd give up. Or think that I wasn't doing it properly and probably get more agitated, whereas actually the practice is to sit with that discomfort in the body and sit with that busy mind. And
just to let it come and go without getting so caught up in it. And so I suppose you could say we're adopting a relaxed attitude about the tension, perhaps.
So our learners pointed out that stress is very prevalent. Well, as we were saying before, it is, and particularly I think in developed countries. And so they were really keen to learn about stress reduction strategies. You know, for instance, learning to identify what's in the mind, what images or stories or thoughts are in the mind when we're feeling stressed. That narrative, the self-criticism, the judgment, the trying to, the multitasking, all of these things that are actually creating stress. Once we can see that it's not just the situation, but it's actually what's happening in the mind that's creating that fight and flight response, that stress response. It's very empowering because then we can work with it. Perhaps by not getting so caught up in those things, not fighting with things.
And we will notice the patterns more. There are particular patterns of thought that we tend to get drawn into. Worry about the future. It's got to work out like this. If it doesn't, it's a disaster. And we'll notice all sorts of unhelpful patterns of thought. And in a sense, the mindfulness can help to underpin other cognitive therapies that a person might be doing, because it'll illuminate it, but it gives us that step or two back from it. That gives us an opportunity to choose to engage or just leave it alone. So, there's been some interesting discussion as well about learning that we're not our thoughts.
That's an interesting one, isn't it?
And it's interesting because there we are. We're just aware, and then a thought comes into the mind. It's there for a time, it passes. Another thought comes into the mind, it passes. An emotion arises, we observe it, it passes.
If we're practicing mindfulness and have that space. Now, a lot of people don't have that, and thoughts and emotions are very real, aren't they?
And sensations come and go. And so there's this kind of sense that there's something observing the coming and going of thoughts, feelings, sensations, events, experiences, moods, etc. So if they all come and go, but we don't come and go,
or something's not coming and going, you might ask, well, what is that?
That's right. And that's a very big philosophical question in a lot of ways. But I suppose in the world's great wisdom traditions, they talked about the observer or the consciousness, the awareness itself. not what it's illuminating. I suppose you could say the light in the room and then what it illuminates, but the light, in a sense, is the awareness, but the other stuff's all coming and going within the room.
Yeah, I like to meditate on that. I'm very interested in what is it that's awake, what's aware right now. That's usually what I'm putting my attention on when I'm meditating these days. A very powerful practice.
And that's the core, the center of the being, the stability, the equanimity comes from that. And the other stuff, when we get so attached to things that are transient, well, that's a great recipe for stress, anxiety, grief, etc. But just because we're mindful doesn't mean that stuff doesn't come and go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, panic attacks. Well, you know, any tips for those who suffer from panic attacks? Well, obviously they're distressing and very difficult to work with sometimes. When I'm working with my clients in my private practice, I help them to recognize when they're feeling anxious, recognize that that's a fight and flight response driven by something in the mind, and also to not panic about or not get anxious about being anxious. Because if we're feeling that anxiety in the body and then we think, oh my God, what if this gets worse? Or maybe there's something wrong. That anxiety feeds back into it. Those fight and flight symptoms increase. Yeah. We're then feeling more and more and more anxious and we spiral out of control. So if we can sit with that discomfort without feeding it or fighting it, that tends to help. At least we might still feel very uncomfortable, but at least we're not then spiraling. Yeah,
and one of the things that happens, I think it's a trap from mindfulness point of view, is that a wave of panic comes up. And then we say, quick, practice mindfulness, quick, make it go away.
Make it go away with the mindfulness.
and when we talk about mindfulness and say acceptance, I mean, we mean acceptance. So if there's a wave of panic, to be accepting, to be gentle with that, just noticing it.
And not just accepting here as an idea, but accepting as in let's be with this experience as it is and learn to not react to it.
That's right. Yeah. Because very often what we're doing when we're thinking we're practicing mindfulness is the opposite of mindfulness. Quick, practice mindfulness, practice acceptance to make it go away. And of course what we're doing is there's a veneer of acceptance over the top of intense non-acceptance. Yeah. And of course that escalates it. Yeah. And so it is what it means, Yeah. There's been some interesting discussion this week too about not only neuroplasticity, brain function, dementia, etc., but some discussion, and I think it's really valuable discussion about a kind of a skepticism about mindfulness. And we do need a healthy skepticism because we don't want to just believe something because somebody says. I just checked this morning, I think there are 976 new papers published on PubMed on mindfulness this year. Yeah. Now, not every one of those studies is a gold standard randomized controlled trial, so the quality of research is very variable, and you can't draw definite conclusions from lesser quality studies. They're like signposts, they don't take us the whole way. Yeah. And so we do need a healthy kind of skepticism. Is it a panacea? Well, kind of yes, in the sense that it can pretty much help with anything else we want to do, but no in the sense that we won't all practice it well or regularly or learn it well or be interested. Yeah. So it's not going to help everybody if it's not learned well, not practiced properly or consistently. So but I think there's really a healthy level of skepticism about mindfulness or anything else for that matter.
It's good to be asking these questions and to be looking at the quality of the research. And as you said, it really seems to help with a huge array of different physical and mental health problems, as well as performance and learning and a whole bunch of stuff. I think the really strong evidence seems to be around improving focus and memory, reducing stress, and of course preventing depressive relapse. That's probably where most of the research is, and that's certainly what's driving the enthusiasm for research in mindfulness these days, I think, especially in mental health.
And mind you, if there was as much money in mindfulness research as there was in drug research, then we would have gone a lot further in a lot less space of time in terms of the quality of evidence. Yeah. Discussions about, too, the length of practice.
Yeah, well, that's an open question and one that hasn't really been answered properly. We're sort of thinking with Neil about sort of doing that in the future, looking at like what is the minimum dose. Some of the programs that have been most widely researched, like mindfulness-based stress reduction, ask for 45 minutes of meditation every day. I've been seeing a lot of evidence recently that centers around about 10 minutes a day. There seems to be some of the research we've done, some of the other studies that I've seen, whether it's online programs, face-to-face programs around concentration, stress, performance. So 10 minutes a day seems to be a formal meditation practice. Then the application in throughout the rest of the day seems to be a pretty good amount at least in the beginning.
And mind you, for and MBSR, MBCT would be gold standard programs in mindfulness, but they're mostly applied for people with major recurrent depression, major chronic pain.
MBCT, definitely.
Yeah, you know, where the level of distress and the motivation is high enough for a person to step into that amount of practice. Whereas in day-to-day life, just the ups and downs of things in day-to-day life, the motivation to have that level of practice is not there for most people, and yet it seems that benefits can be derived from lesser amounts of practice. So, yeah, there are a lot of questions to be answered as far as that's concerned. We've pitched it at one level, which hopefully meets the needs and interests of whatever the average person is.
Obviously, the more we do, the better. But it is good. I think it's heartening to know, especially for people beginning, that even 5 or 10 minutes a day can have an effect. So it's definitely worth doing that and then building that up over time.
Yeah.
And just following on from what you said before as well, there's the formal meditation practice, and then there's the informal practice, which just means, you know, bringing mindfulness to all the other activities we do throughout the day, off the cushion, so to speak.
Yeah.
And both of those things are very important.
Yeah.
And if people struggle with meditation, sometimes they start with the informal stuff, and that's where, you know, they might move around, do chores mindfully, exercise mindfully, you know, those kinds of things. And the meditation's very important. That's the massed practice, you know, really creating those neural brain changes. That's the ability to sit and look inside and see how the mind works, which we maybe don't get playing sport.
That's right. And in a way, the practice cultivating the skills and capacities in meditation is the training for life. And we need to connect those two things.
Yes. Yeah. So some great stuff coming up next week, Craig. We're going to be looking at the myth of multitasking. Yes. So stay tuned for that one. And how we can start to use things like unitasking and managing technology well to improve our performance and productivity. Yeah. And we're going to be looking at some of the cognitive practices, sort of noticing different aspects of mindfulness. So, so we look forward to that. See you next week.